would I vote for this one that you've got? Yes, sir. But I prefer a value-added tax to give you a bigger base. The one I did for Jerry Brown was I did a value-added tax and a personal unadjusted income tax. Now those two, a value-added tax, if done correctly, is 100% of GDP. Consumption tax, income tax, 100% of GDP as well. The value-added tax is when people buy it, and the income tax is when they earn it. So it's a double entry accounting system. They're both GDP. So what I did with Jerry was I tried to get half the rate and double the base. Okay? So I had that there. Now, if you look at total taxes and the federal taxes, a share of GDP in the U.S., it's a little over 20%, about 21%, something like that. That's federal. So what I did with him is we got it, so it came out, I think it came out 11.8% was a revenue neutral, but that doesn't include, I didn't tax profits from government-owned corporations. I didn't do the imputed rental value of owner-occupied homes. I didn't do the imputation of services by wives or husbands in the house, all of that stuff. So that's how we did it, but you're always gonna, that's the way I would go. And if I looked at his tax and did that, and I'd have to do the numbers carefully, but you could get a long-term steady state, and especially if you took the spending out of the extra employees that you've got and how much excess you pay them. And I'll bet you these jobs have a lot of people wanting to take them. Yeah, but everyone wants one of those jobs. Well, just go to the place where you have the people, there's no more about them once you got that group. And that's what we do in Tennessee. We have very low wages for state employees, and we have very few state employees per 10,000 population. But our lines are just matched up. If anyone wants to quit, we can find someone to take their place.
So, go to Jeff question.
Yeah. So you've got a lot of cushion here you can do. It just depends on how radically you want to go.
What's the difference between value-added tax and sales tax?
It shouldn't be very much. The sales tax collects it at the end. And the value-added tax cuts a little bit at each stage.
Let's say production.
Well, it's the same tax. All of these are just GDP. All of them are the same tax base. It's just at what stage do you measure it? Now, an income tax, if you count all income, the capital and labor and agriculture, is still all GDP. Because everything that's sold has to be bought. Everything that's, the income comes in. So you've got all these different alternatives, one of which is the fair tax, one of which is the value-added tax, one of which is an income tax. Those are all. Now, I like the value-added tax because it keeps a border problem from occurring. It keeps a border problem. If a value-added tax is you take your sales less your purchases from tax-exempt organizations who, they've already paid their taxes. So if you buy lumber, it's already paid its taxes, and then you sell a house, you pay taxes on the difference between the price of the house and the price of the lumber you bought, as long as you have the certificate that the tax was collected on the lumber. And so that's a real easy way of doing it. I mean, it really is easy.
Why don't you do it the same way you explained the interest? If I bought the lumber, and I bought the lumber at 10 cents on, or $100, but I paid arbitrary 5%. But then when I get the lumber, I change it into something, right? And I pay 5%, and then when I sell it to you, you pay 5%. Well, therefore, when you took the interest and said, I borrowed money at 3%.
Let me go back.
Well, that's
What you
sense.
just gave me is an example of where I paid the tax twice. What I do is I subtract the tax from the purchase of the lumber from the tax item. So if you sell a house for $100,000 and you've got a 5% tax, that's it, it's 5%. Now, if you paid 5% of the lumber, you get to deduct it from that number. So it's paid only once. That's the pyramiding that you really want to avoid. The pyramiding can kill you.
You're saying I can subtract what I paid, just the dollars, but the percentage still stays the same.
And that stays the same in every industry is that.
Let's say you take a car that you're going to sell, and you're talking about value-added tax. Average car has about 1,300 parts. Okay. help me here to understand how that isn't complicated.
It is complicated, but let me give you an example if I can. I try to explain to everyone the government spending is taxation. I'm going to use a different example, but it's the exact same principle. All my liberal friends tell me government spending is stimulus. They do. That's what they say. You know, all the Keynesians do that. You know, if you give a guy $500, he's going to spend some of that. That's going to create jobs, output, employment. But you've seen all that done, and that's the Keynesian model. And you know, nothing wrong with it, except it's not complete. What I do is I tell them, you know, if it's good economics, it's scalable. If it works in the U.S., that economic system, it would work in China with a much bigger system. If it's good economics, it really is scalable. It would work in Luxembourg with all 4 people. The problem is when you look at the U.S. economy and look at spending, it's impossible to keep track of the T accounts. With your 1,300 products, oh my God, you've got credit default swaps, you've got capital inflows, you've got multipliers, you've got velocity. Oh my God, I'm so confused, I can't see. But the neatest thing about understanding that good economics is scalable is it allows you to explain it. Now, if it works in China, in the US, and Luxembourg, it works at any scale. Now imagine we have a 2-person world. Farmer A and Farmer B. That's it. The same economics works there as it does in 330 million people in the US, okay? You with me? If Farmer B gets unemployment benefits, who do you think pays for them? Am I going way over your heads on this? Government spending is taxation. I had a horrible time with Senator Nelson on this in 1974, one of the dumbest, excuse me, I shouldn't talk this way. Jerry Ford's about the dumbest anyone I'd ever seen. And he had this tax rebate that he was going, they said it would stimulate the economy and all that. I tried to explain how it wouldn't do that with Nelson. I was with Otto Eckstein, Paul McCracken, and Gardner Ackley were at the podium with me there. And I was trying to explain the income effects and the substitution effects, and I gave you the income effects there. Senator Nelson, these guys were all saying this will stimulate the economy. I said, Senator Nelson, if my 3 colleagues sitting here next to me are correct, what the hell's the matter with you? Why don't you like your country? If $600 will stimulate the economy, what the hell's wrong with you? They get 6,000, 60,000, 600,000, 100% of GDP. So everyone who works and produces receives nothing, and all those who don't work and don't produce receive everything. What do you think, Senator, would happen to the economy? His answer was, go to 0. I said that. And then he looks over at the other 3 economists, the 3 I mentioned to you, and they were the 3 there. He said, what's wrong with Dr. Laffer's argument? Oh, well, he's right in the extreme, but in the range we're working, it works the other way. Yeah, right.
This was just a second, so there's 10 of us in here, and Senator takes $200 for each one of us and gives you $2,000. What he's saying is, he's saying, you can spend $2,000 better than I can spend my own $200.
Yeah, but the trouble is you won't earn the $200 anymore.
Right, he took it from me.
Yeah, you won't do it again.
And he kept 10%.
I have this story, it's lovely to tell. I tell my students to follow this way. I said, if I ran my class where your government your country, what I would do is I'd flunk all the A students out and I'd give all the F students scholarships. Now before you giggle, my A students happen to be a little bit smarter than my F students. So once I've changed the rules, my A students are able to get lower grades than my F students because they never randomly make the mistake of guessing a correct answer. My A students still get all the scholarships, my F students are still flunked out, just the same as before. I have not changed the distribution of grades 1 iota. What have I done? I've destroyed the entire quality of the educational process. Let me tell you this, you cannot change the distribution of income with taxes. It ain't gonna happen. But what you can do is change the volume of income with taxes. What you want to do is not play the game of a rebate or let's separate. I'm teasing you, but Senator, excuse me. But I mean, just do it straight there and then spend the damn money you want by writing checks. But don't give in to these things of, and what was it the Godfather said to the singer? Don't cry like a little baby in front of me, whack, whack, whack. Remember when he slapped the guy's name in the movie, right, the singer? You guys haven't seen The Godfather.
I've got a long time.
He's crying like a baby.
All of us agree
What's
that we
going on
need,
now?
we need a different tax system. And I applaud Senator Irwin for working on
It's
this.
amazing what he's done.
Okay. Nebraskans are very independent. We want our local control. So, go to this consumption tax. I'm gonna be the devil's advocate here. You brought up part of the answer. The state, instead of the local, collects the money. So we gotta have the regulations, the rules set for how it gets distributed back. The people that do that have the power. There, and power corrupts. So you gotta, this is gonna be a monumental task to get those regulations drawn up so that it's not corruptible. It's for people to change it. And I don't know what all is in your plan, Senator, but, when I look at it, I'm 100% for this kind of movement. But we gotta be able to tell these people, okay, you're not gonna have the control on it, this money's gonna come back to you, but you gotta have a valid system, budget, whatever, to make it work.
Yeah, you have to have a subvention formula. You collect the money, how much goes to the state, how much goes to cities, counties, and local districts, and then to which cities, which counties, which local districts. And you have to have a formula-driven model, so it can't be politically, it can't be,
And so then, who decides this school?
let me tell you how
People need a new
you,
road.
I'm
How do
glad.
you determine it?
I'll tell you how we were thinking of doing it, Rick. We had a 5-year override with a supermajority on the tax. It had to have a sunset clause. If, let's say, San Diego decided to build a sports palace for their racers, and they wanted to do it as an add-on, they could, with a vote of the electorate, supermajority, get an additional on their tax, but do it, but then it had a grant, and a 5-year, we used a 5-year moratorium on a sunset, and then you had to do it again. That's exactly what we did with St. Louis and Kansas City, and they wanted to have it a second time.
But the stadium's built, so you gotta pay for it, it's gonna take 30 years. So, in 5 years, they've only paid off.
They would pay off the whole thing if they did it. Otherwise, you can't spend beyond your means.
Our problem's gonna run into is that we're a unicamera. So what we do is we have a unicameral, which is based on population. And then the citizens have the right to petition, instead of having that in the Senate. So what we developed, we've got 2 democracies going. And what happens with democracies?
They louse things up.
51% enslaves 49%.
Yes, it does.
And that's what's gonna happen, that's our fear, us rural people are afraid, that
Lincoln and Omaha are gonna control it.
Well, I tell you,
Right,
see,
because-
we made ours a constitutional amendment in California.
Because-
Prop 13 was, now that we have a very high bar to get a constitutional amendment in California, which is much higher than a proposition, which would be just like passing a law, and we have the high bar, and that constitutional amendment has been attacked 4 times, 5 times, never comes close. This year, they tried to split roll, separate business property from residential property. We got it, we nailed it.
what I was gonna say is, to your point though, when you talk about San Diego, they need to get a majority of voted electors to give them a 5-year window, right? If Bedford wants something, I doubt Bedford's gonna get the majority of the electors to vote to say Bedford can.
They shouldn't do it then.
So we do the citizenry out there.
But it's not gonna have a sports complex out there, it's gonna have its regular taxes, its regular revenues.
Well, pick anything, pick a road or a culvert, or a bridge.
Oh, all those should be funded out of current expenditures. I mean, that's what they should be done.
Yeah, but this bridge could last another 5 years, so why do you need it today?
Well, if you wanna do a capital budget and then do a income budget, you can do that. Some of the countries do that. I mean, we had one that we did in the US. I was the first chief economist at the OMB. And we kept the capital budget in it, but everything became just the current budget, which included capital expenditure.
value-added tax or sales tax is collected at the retail outlet, right? Here's our problem. We have about 8 or 10 retail centers. I have one in my district, North Platte. 6 or 7 counties around there, they all come to North Platte and they purchase the retail center. And that Hemingford doesn't collect any taxes. So how do we trace it back to the purchaser so the tax goes back to Hemingford?
That is a very big difficulty here with the consumption tax. That's why I gave you the story of Missouri to start with. They have 2,339 separate sales tax jurisdictions. They have nothing to do with the sales tax location and the sales tax collection. Believe me, this is not a local collected tax for local services. It's not. I mean, these are big centers there that have nothing to do with
So
others.
then how does Hemingford, which has retail, nothing, a bar and a cafe and a bunch of rural folks,
That's why you make
how
it.
to build a new school when you can't add on to their value-added tax because they're purchasing in North Platte?
Well, you can add on to a value-added tax, but you can add on to an income tax, which is what we did in Missouri.
You do local income tax.
Yep, well, Missouri has a local income tax in 2 cities. It has it in St. Louis and it has it in Kansas City. Those are the only 2. Now, we prohibited it with the first proposition from any new city ever doing it. We won that, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago. All right?
A lot of people from here are moving to Missouri, so something's going on.
No, they're not.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, they
Oh,
are.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, I've never heard of, oh my Lord.
It's
That is the worst condemnation of Nebraska I've ever heard.
Hard.
And they're moving.
Listen to this story.
Those people-
I have a friend, I have a
Oh
friend,
my God.
I have a friend that sold 3 irrigated quarters in Knox County. He was paying $100 an acre in taxes. He bought, the equivalent, he bought 800 more acres down just north of Kansas City. He's paying 3% property tax. He's making $98 an acre simply because he moved.
No, but it's, I've got 2,500 acres in Kentucky. That's because Kentucky's so bad, everything's cheaper in Cali because it's a depression. And I got all this lovely land, which they don't raise cattle on it. No, but, hey,
Well, I'm talking about the middle class guy. We had a state patrolman everybody loved here was a guard at the, he just retired. Sold his house in Nebraska, he paid $200,000. $5,000 taxes. Went to Missouri, bought a nice place by the Lake of the Ozarks, paid $1,800 property taxes on variable value. His retirement, now, I believe they don't tax Social Security retirement, they don't tax retirement. So for that guy, Missouri's a heaven.
yeah, you're right.
And not for the upper class, I'm talking for the, can I ask you a question before we break up about what's going on nationally?
Yes,
Took economics out of economics. Keynes, I think Keynes is rolling over his grave right now because he said we only use it in national emergency after coming out of a war to stimulate the economy with the government spending. This writing checks and sending it out to people for no damn reason at all, and our economy, we're booming. We can't spend money fast enough in the state of Nebraska now, our legislature, because of the old economic theory. You take $1 into a community and you tax it 4 times before it leaves the community. We're just rolling in money. What the hell's gonna happen when that checks quit being written?
let me do 2 things with you on this. And let me do the stimulus spending that's there. And I want to talk about the theory of redistribution. Redistribution is when you take from someone who has a little bit more, you give to someone who has a little bit less.
They're doing it.
No, but they are doing a lot of that. $5,000 checks to everyone. You don't have to work to get those checks. Okay? You take from someone who has a little bit more, and you give to someone who has a little bit less. You with me? Now, whenever you take from someone who has a little bit more, you reduce that person's incentives to produce, and that person will produce a little bit less. All with me? Now, by giving that little bit to the person who has a little bit less, you provide that person with an alternative source of income other than working. And that person too will work a little bit less. Now this is math. I mean, this is not left-wing, right-wing, Republican, Democrat, liberal, or conservative. It's just straight math. Whenever you redistribute income, you always reduce total income, period. That's math. Let me. Now the lemma here in this theorem is, you'll like this. The lemma is the more you redistribute, the greater will be the loss in income.
But they are not redistributing We were at the Trump tax cuts yet, all right, so they haven't taken any more. They are printing the money. They didn't take from the farmer A and give the farmer B. They took nothing from farmer A and they printed it.
No, that's why I did the
Right
example.
now.
No, that's why I did the example with farmer A and farmer B. If there were two people and they printed the money for one, the other one still loses it. That's why I got rid of all the bales of money and bonds and stuff, because you can't follow the T accounts. Believe me, if you get, for not working, a bushel of apples, there's someone who lost a bushel of apples for working. It's double entry accounting. And I can't take you through it on 335 million, but I can with two people. That's why I do.
But don't you, when you print this, and you actually didn't take from.
You do take from
people
someone who
who
bought the bonds.
There's your point, but don't we eventually have to become Germany in the 19 teens and Argentina?
Oh, yeah. No, let me go to where it's, hey, by doing this redistribution, all right, the limit function of this theorem, okay, the theorem is, and whenever you redistribute, you always lose income. The lemma is, the more you redistribute, the greater will be the loss. And the limit function is if you were to redistribute all income, so everyone came out exactly equal, there will be no income. Now let me explain that to you so you can see it clearly. To get everyone to come out exactly the same, what you got to do is tax everyone who earns above the average income 100% of the excess. And everyone who makes below the average income, you have to subsidize them up to the average income, 100%. Now, if you actually did that, if you actually taxed a person 100% of the excess above the average income and subsidize all those below the average income up to the average income, I will stipulate today, Counselor, everyone come out equal at zero.